We're not sure what we're talking about today. Or maybe we're talking about two things at once. No, actually, we do know. We're talking about ambiguity on this episode of the Learning Geeks podcast, starting now. Hello, boys.
Hello.
How are you? It's just the three of us today.
Just the three of us. Sorry to disappoint
delightful.
Listeners.
Yeah.
No guest.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
us.
Dana's like, it's delightful. Jake's like, sorry to disappoint. Speaking of ambiguity, right? Like,
half of the guests are turning off now. Oh, it's just those three guys.
Yeah. Anyway, how are you guys doing? You know, we've been talking in the green room for a little bit, but I should have shared. I've got a little bit of a cold today, and I have a reservation to go to Disneyland tonight to see the brand new, what's it called, Skywalker Saga on the Spires projection show.
I've seen pictures.
It looks
Looks
awesome.
cool.
Yeah. You might have heard that I have a Star Wars podcast called Short for a Stormtrooper, and so
Tell us about that, Bob. What is
because
it
of
about?
that, I thought I should go and experience this and cover it to share with my listeners over there, who I hope a lot of Learning Geeks people are listeners over there. And but you know, it's one of those things where you make the reservation. I made the reservation, and now I wake up and I'm kind of like, oh, I really don't feel like going because I've got a cold. And but if you get a no-show, you can only get 3 no-shows, and then you can't make another reservation on your annual pass for 30 days. So slave to the mouse.
So if you had a robot, you could send the robot in your stead. Hello, I am Bob Gerard.
I could, which is what my voice was doing before.
It was.
So,
Hey, can I do a shout out?
you can. Yeah.
Shout out to our friend Lauren Hodges. Her book was published a year ago.
Oh my goodness.
The anniversary was actually April 2nd. So shout out to Lauren. Congrats on the successful book.
Wow.
Yeah,
And I never
congrats.
realized how thick that book was until you just held it up. I have a Kindle copy, so you
Oh.
never.
Oh, I was going to say, because you've never read it, huh, Bob?
No, I've read it. but- I remember like reading the Steve Jobs, the Walter Isaacson Steve Jobs biography, and like I devoured that. That went really quick, and then I saw like how thick that book actually was. It was like, oh my gosh, it's like this thick.
Yeah.
I'm holding my fingers about 3 inches apart.
So for those who weren't on YouTube, the title of the book is Less Stress, More Calm.
Yeah.
By Lauren Hodges. So shout out to Lauren, frequent guest on the show. Congrats.
That's exciting. I can't believe it's already been a year.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason I know it's a year, it's because it's a year from when I officially retired.
That's right.
That same day
Congratulations.
is the same day that she published her book.
Which is also amazing that it's been that long.
I know. It really
that's-
is.
Jeez.
We miss you every day. We miss you every day. Jake's gotten over you. That's what happened when he.
Yeah, I know. That's what happened. He got over me he got over me before he left Accenture. He's like, oh,
That's
I'm
right.
done with this
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
I'm
He
done
was
with
fine.
Dana. Real quick before we kind of jump on the topic.
Yeah, what's your life announcement?
Speaking of your podcast, did the two of you get to talk and speak about the Andor trailer?
Yeah, we did. It was actually really
did.
fun, and we did miss you on that one too, Jake. That would have been really fun. But
I was doing another job of working on house stuff. But how did it go?
it
What
went
did you all
great.
think?
So yeah, for the very few of you who have not yet subscribed to Short for a Stormtrooper, the 15-minute Star Wars podcast, it was the day before it was supposed to come out, and I was ready to do one show, and then Lucasfilm surprise dropped a new trailer for Andor Season 2, which I was very excited about, and I said we need to talk about it. So I pinged these two guys. I was like, hey, you want to hop on and talk about it? Jake was doing carpentry, I think, and but Dana said he would come on and he would actually interview me, so that was really fun. He turned the tables on the podcast, and I thought it turned out very well.
And
So
when will that be released? I know that when we release this, it's always later, but
it's been released. It's been in the can for a couple of
okay.
weeks.
I have not paid attention to anything in the last 5 days.
Well, you've been traveling and doing fun
Well, I
things,
was traveling. So for those who don't know, I was traveling. I was in Barcelona for a week, and then I had a couple days off. And then rather than, I had one day off, and everywhere I went was rainy.
Yeah.
Everywhere I went was rainy because I went to Wisconsin for a day and a half, rainy. Came back, I got put to work on carpentry, put up cabinets, and working on a mudroom, laundry room. So I have not really seen the outside world other than certain things, but
Well, springtime in Chicago, that happens.
it happens.
If you don't like the
So
weather,
your
what
schedule
do?
was fairly ambiguous.
Good segue,
Good
Dan.
segue.
There was a lot of ambiguity with your schedule.
It needed to be done, so that was good. Yeah, so Jake has suggested this topic, and I'm going to turn most of it over to him. But I think he was inspired by a book that I also actually own called Navigating Ambiguity. Comes out from Stanford D School, and it's Andrea Small and Kelly Schmutte. Is that how we pronounce her name? We know her, right? Did we ever figure out how we pronounce her name? Kelly, sorry if we're butchering your last name.
I think it's Kelly Schmutte, but I could be.
Oh, Schmutte, okay.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Yes. We have not met her before. We know of our friend Tessa is a
That's right.
friend of her. So, like, we have a connection at some
communicated.
point. I communicated, yes.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, I thought this book was great. And by the way, if you want to pick it up, this whole series of Stanford D School guides are great. You can really knock one of these off in an afternoon very easily. They're nice and short, and lots of pictures for those of us who like pictures. But I'll tell you, one of the most insightful things from here, because I went into this book saying, what's the difference between uncertainty and ambiguity? And one of the first big full spread quotes, it says, the future has never been more uncertain. I think they kind of did themselves a disservice by starting with that. But here's the difference, right? The difference between uncertainty and ambiguity is uncertainty, you don't know what's going to happen, but something is going to happen. It's going to be either A or B, or, maybe A, B, or C, but you're not sure what is going to happen. Ambiguity is talking about looking at the same thing two different ways and maybe coming up with two different explanations for it, or understanding something in two different ways that may be equally true at the same time. And once I kind of glommed onto that idea, it was like the light bulb went on, and I realized, oh, this is cool, because the rest of the premise of this book is kind of, as designers and especially for us as learning people, that's something that we should use as an advantage, that we are able to look at things a little bit differently. So, Jake, I will turn it over to you, and hope I didn't just steal all of your thunder.
No, you didn't, because I think I still get the definition a little mixed up. Because even when you do read the book, there's a moment of there's a lot of gray area in the definition, right? At least in terms of uncertainty. The uncertainty is where the gray area lives, and then where ambiguity lives, it's more. I'm sorry, flip-flop that. Ambiguity is more of the gray area. The uncertainty is the black and white,
right,
and all that. But yeah, so I want to bring this topic up because I am going to mention some of even what I have been thinking about. It deals with uncertainty, because I think you're going to hear, even if you read the book, you're going to see that term used a lot as well. But it's funny because this is like perfect timing today. I was in the middle of some deep research writing, and again, perfect time for this conversation. And one of the things that I was writing about and thinking about, and part of the research trends that we do every single year, and we've had a podcast episode last year, we hope to have one this year, and the world today is like incredibly complex. It's ever changing. And if you just look at your retirement accounts right now, if you opened it up, your retirement accounts will basically tell you how uncertain and how complex the world is today. And and although as we're chuckling, and the day of recording this was the announcement of new tariffs, so I definitely don't recommend probably looking at it today, because the Dow definitely dropped today.
My dreams of following in Dana's footsteps are rapidly fading.
But the one thing, there's one single thing that I at least focused on that I think is a big disruptor, but it's a huge thing that's causing a chaotic, impressive pace of innovation. And that is, survey says, what would you say?
AI.
AI. You are right, Dana. You win nothing. But it is AI. AI is something that, if you think of what organizations are doing, what people are doing, they're trying to figure out what comes of this. We have seen these types of disruption before, but then really what's going to happen? And that's causing a massive unknown. It's also something that I think that businesses and organizations are trying to figure out, how do we keep up with this innovation change? And their heads are spinning. they're investing one way, and then the next day or next month they're investing in another way because a new feature got announced, or deep research got announced, or DeepSeek gets announced. It's variety of different directions. So this cycle continues to go on. And I like to think of this, it's pretty much chaos, and it causes a lot of stress on orgs. It causes a lot of stress on the individual, because what we'll talk about probably later is like when we go through these moments, I know personally, I feel like giving up and going living on a farm somewhere, because it just feels easier to do. But one thing today, I think that it's all important about this topic is that, and we'll talk about it in the book, but in the book, they mention the notion that dealing with ambiguity is not about stressing about uncertainty. It's about reframing it as a creative opportunity, because there's something exciting that does exist out there with all this chaos and all this mess that you would say, and that we just need help in figuring out how to uncover those opportunities in this madness. And I think that that's what the book and the guidebook did really well. And I think that there's things that in our past and our experience that we, at least when I read it, I started to reflect on what do we do well. And I thought today would be a great time to talk what are the techniques that we personally do during these times, as well as what do we feel like during these moments, during these times, because I think it should be relatable. Hopefully you feel that. Again, we're innovation guys. You've probably, we know what it feels like, but also there's tactics that I think you can all walk away with. That sound good?
Yeah.
So, Jake, are you putting AI in the ambiguity or uncertainty bucket, or some of it in each?
See, this is where I feel like it's a mix between both, because it does cause uncertainty of what the future is, and there may be an answer of A or B or C of what I can predict could happen, but it's also causing a wide variety of variables beneath that layer. So like I think of organizations themselves are investing in multiple different directions. Then it's causing the individual to know, like, what am I doing? So it's causing a lot of uncertainty, but at the same time, like, how do I solve problems that it's very, like, it's new, it's different directions, how I take one piece and figure out what can I do to have a creative, solve this problem creatively.
Or maybe one way you could look at that as a learning professional is Gen AI is definitely changing the job of your typical, say, instructional designer. It's going to change. And so that can be a bad thing, in that it can be disruptive. It can make people feel uncertain, don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, have to learn new skills, all of that kind of stuff. But it's ambiguous in that it's also a good thing that they get to learn new skills, that maybe they're going to find not a new career, but a changed career that is more fulfilling to them, ultimately more rewarding. I can see all of these things happening, and that's where the ambiguity comes in. It is either the definitions are a little ambiguous and uncertain, and sorry to be circular there, but it's true. It is.
And Bob, do you have any, before we kind of jump into some of the topics, is there any quick takeaways outside of the definition that you felt just by reading that maybe have changed what you do on a day-to-day basis?
I'm not sure if on a day-to-day basis, but it just helped reinforce, to me, it helped reinforce the idea of letting go. And, when I start feeling really stressed and anxious about work, I realize it's usually because I have a lot on my plate and I'm not sure how to get it done. Like I don't see what the pathway is before it. I'm going to have to figure out that pathway. And that feels like negative uncertainty to me. And for for me, taking a look at and kind of reframing it just as, it's not that it's completely uncertain. It's a little ambiguous. There's various ways that you can take this, but also kind of trusting the process and knowing it's okay. It's okay that we don't quite know exactly what the steps are going to be to do this. This is my job as an innovator, is to figure that out as we go along. I can reassure myself and I can coach myself through that I'm just dealing with some ambiguity right now. I'm not necessarily dealing with crippling uncertainty, and then it helps me move forward a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard an analogy one time where it's the idea of think of the old Western trains, right, with the light that's shining only a certain distance, right, and so
Yeah.
it creeps ahead, right, and as it does, there's more light available, and then at some point the sun comes up and you don't need the light, but
Yeah.
navigating that ambiguity, is some animal going to come across the tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
I kind of like that idea of sometimes you just have to go at a slow pace with as far as you have information and insight, and then something happens and like a switch goes and the sunlight comes up.
Mm-hmm. So Bob, going back to you, you said you're kind of mentioning some emotions or feelings that you have.
Yeah.
Are those the types of feelings of when you think of ambiguous times, like you think of the feeling of stress, or what comes to your mind, and what do you feel during those moments?
Yeah, I think that's the point I'm trying and probably failing to make is by reframing it as ambiguity, I'm able to turn the negative emotion into a positive emotion. And
Yeah, like there can be more than one path here, like a couple
exactly.
paths. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you kind of wind up feeling a little excited, like, oh wow, we're not quite sure how to do this. Let's try a couple of different things,
Yeah.
or let's kick these ideas around and play with it a little bit. And I remember once, years and years and years ago, I was in an office with a designer who was working for me, and we were talking, and we were getting really loud. We were getting super, super loud, and Monty Watkins, Dane, I think you remember Monty.
Yeah.
He was working with us at the time. All he heard was like loud noises coming from the office, and he thought that I was tearing this guy apart, right? And so we come out of the office, and Monty's like, is everything okay? Like, is everything all right? I'm like, yeah. Why? He's like, you were so loud in there. I was like, oh no, it wasn't me being angry. It was the excitement of new knowledge, and Monty loved that, and he wrote that down on a Post-it note and put it up. And it made me realize that exploring new ideas gets very impassioned and exciting, and you can really dive into it. But you do need a little bit of certainty around it that everything is going to be okay. You need trust that your life is not on the line. Your job is not at risk if you don't know quite precisely how to solve this problem. And that's where you can start getting excited and feel very positive about it.
Yeah. I know, Dana, what about you when you think about those times?
Well, what I think about, and I'm reflecting here on what Bob's saying, is that when you're in a world of ambiguity, you could look at it as something to be discouraged or depressed about, or you could use it as a spark for creativity and innovation. A lot of it has to do with the framing. How do you look at that particular thing? And I think, Bob, part of the other thing you're hitting on is the importance of psychological safety.
Yeah.
I think if you blend psychological safety with ambiguity, you're going to have a more positive outcome than if you don't have a psychologically safe environment.
Right. Yeah, I one thing that I have learned about myself, and I'm going to use this time today, or like the environment today, that there is a lot of uncertainty.
Yep.
In a wide variety of areas.
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just the bias stuff today, like recency bias. I have no idea. I don't know if there's some data that shows that uncertainty is more than ever, even though even in this book and everywhere else you'll see that. But I just feel like it's very prominent. It's here all the time. I never know what's going to happen. So there are moments where I feel incredibly stressed. And like I said earlier, I would rather just go live on a farm somewhere and just do that. It's simple.
But when you get on the farm, there's going to be stress there too.
There's also stress there. There's plenty of stress. Trust me, for someone that grew up on a farm, I know that some of the stress that comes with it. But
I was going to say, if you need to be reminded, watch the show Clarkson's Farm. And, Yeah, it's a reality show about a celebrity who buys a farm because he thinks it's going to be relaxing. It's hysterical.
It's not. It's not. I know. I say that, and the thing in reality is, I know it's not, because
Exactly.
it's like I know exactly that. But then one thing that I have tried to train myself, and again, I'm not ever perfect, and still need to kind of remind myself of techniques of like, again, how do I reframe these as opportunities when there are a lot of unknowns? Is like there's moments if I can figure out what are the opportunities that exist in here. And to your point, Bob, that's when I get excited. I get excited of the creative process that follows of, okay, there's something that could be here. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out what is a possible path, and new ways to explore it and reframe it that way. But the thing that I think I've done better at is let the stress and the doubt and the fear just like come in, knowing that it will pass. Because if I try to like avoid it from happening, that comes with anxiety. That's kind of my anxiety techniques and stuff. But let it come, accept it, talk through it, self-talk it, and then guess what? Now let's find opportunities and figure that out, because that's where the exciting piece comes in. I agree.
So do either of you have a kind of a practical example from work where you you were living in a world of ambiguity and you were able to reframe it and have a unique outcome, or hopefully a positive outcome?
Bob, you want to go first?
No. I'm trying to think.
So it was either a really good
realize I'm
question or it's a
waxing
really
poetic.
bad question.
I was kind of afraid that this was going to come up, because the whole time as I've been talking, I've been thinking, what's a good example of where I've done this? So, Jake,
the reason for my question is, our audience is a bunch of learning designers, right?
Exactly.
If we can ground it in some type of an example, I think it might be more meaningful. I don't personally have an example that comes to mind, but I thought the two of you might.
I mean, I think I'll use a recent example. In my space, I get asked to, what is the future of the profession? Whether or not I'm communicating to other leaders inside the company, or I'm communicating to people outside, and it's a big question mark. I don't know, right? So like, even when was asked that question, I'm going to use the AI as an example. Like when Gen AI ChatGPT was released, that was kind of the start of the general population knowing about generative AI, and then what are the possibilities and so forth. I didn't know. I really didn't know. But again, thinking back to my techniques of like, I had oh gosh, what does this mean? Am I going to lose my job? I have those moments all the time. But then I figured out, okay, I have techniques that, what could it mean? So you run exercises with a few members of your team. You do kind of what if exercises. We'll get into some topics and so forth. But I figured out, like, I think there's more opportunities here than what the profession has done in the past. So like the way I have found, I think what this is doing is opening the door more up to supporting the development process in areas that we never have in the past. So we have notoriously been known for more formal structures, more formal events, supporting those big in-person trainings and virtual webinars, all of this stuff. But like, if we think of the small percentage of what that really truly does for an individual and the process of learning, it's a small piece. So I'm like, generative AI actually, and even AI, like if we're talking about any types of AI, might help us do less of that work, or at least do it more effectively. But now it opens the door for us to think, how do we help support development in teams? How do we help maybe reach leaders to be better people developers? Like, that's another layer that I think open up opportunities. Or how do we use AI to provide more coaching at scale that we don't get to do with people, don't have people access to individuals all the time. So it was, what I'm basically saying is that I took that challenge and worked through various scenarios with not just myself, but I think it's a team. It requires a team to do this, other people, to get ideas, generate ideas, and then we came up with new what if possibilities that we could explore and test and experiment with. So Bob, you got another one now?
I do. And I hope it doesn't completely overlap with the example you just gave, Jake, because
But these are recent, and there's been a lot of them that have.
Well, I was not completely listening to you because I was trying to think of a good one, but I did.
I was listening, Jake.
I did,
it's
I was
very
half
honest.
listening to you. But I do have a good story, which is we had a learning program that I was the architect for. I was the learning architect for our most senior leaders, the MD Momentum program.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first started doing this with my design, we were able to bring all of these leaders in from all over the world to our central location in St. Charles, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And so we designed this to be basically a week-long simulation of the start of a client engagement. You know, we brought in people who really were clients or former clients to play that role, and we would put them in teams and say, here's the client, here's the problem you're trying to solve, and they would have to go and pitch to the clients. And it was very well received. It worked really, really well. But then we had to make the business decision to, instead of bringing everybody together live from all over the world, we would do it regionally in 3 different locations. We would do one in the United States, one in India, and one in Europe. And we realized very quickly that we weren't going to be able to do the school the same successful way as we were before, just because we couldn't scale. It was really like we couldn't fly all these clients around and make it work. So we were really stumped because we were looking at the problem just this one way of how do we make that work regionally? And what we needed to do was look at it as more of an ambiguous situation and say there's multiple ways that we can solve the problems of addressing these learning objectives, but also do it in a really engaging, durable way. Mm-hmm. And so we brainstormed a few different concepts, and what we came up with was redesigning it to be a tournament of learning games. And we basically took the same activities that they did during the case study, and we turned each one into a separate game. We had the game of connections, the game of solutions, the game of XYZ. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of did like a Harry Potter theme. We put them in houses. They were on teams, but the teams were in houses. The houses were competing. And I tell you what, there is nothing like getting a bunch of really senior executives together to get them to let their hair down and have a good time than not having anybody junior to them in the room at the same time. Because once everybody junior to them is, they got to be cool. They got to be cool.
Yeah.
But once they know that there's nobody who's going to be looking at them, they really
open up.
They open up. They really let it fly, and we're willing to take risks. And that's what we found from this experience was framing it up in this new way. They took a lot more risks, and they were way more receptive to the feedback. They didn't have the ego barrier when they were receiving constructive criticism, because it kind of just felt like, oh, here's how you can do the game better, as opposed to, you are bad at this, I am threatening your existence. And it worked really well. Mm-hmm. So by kind of approaching this with more of an ambiguous attitude as opposed to just an uncertain attitude, we were able to reposition it. And then guess what? We had to do it again the next year because COVID. We had to completely redesign it again. So it was easier that time. We happened quicker.
Yeah.
Kept you employed.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, through that, because I one of the things I'd love to make sure the audience gets is like, what are some practical things that I could use? So like during that process, Bob, like what were some of the methods to get you that way, to get you to that point, those ideas?
Yeah. Aside from kind of what I talked about earlier of just the mental trick of letting go and coaching yourself and reassuring yourself that everything's going to be okay. And, the catastrophe that you're imagining is probably not real. One of the things that was really helpful to me was also letting go of the solution and going back to the problem. And, we had a similar situation the first time we made a run at a virtual learning experience. You guys were both around, I think, at this point. And, we were going to build a very Second Life like learning center. This is like early 2000s, mid 2000s. And the deal fell through at the last minute and we weren't able to do it. But what we did then was we went back and we looked at what really are our objectives. Like our objectives were not around creating a virtual 3D learning center. It was about being able to have learning experiences where we didn't have to fly people around, but they were able to communicate, feel connected, see each other, all those types of things. And we realized that the answer for us at the time was what eventually became our virtual classroom solution. So we were using Adobe Connect, and now we do that all with Microsoft Teams. This was basically the same thing that I did in that story I just told about MD Momentum. When we got away from being married to the solution and just took it back to what are the learning objectives? What are we trying to get across? What are other ways in which we can solve those same problems? Then that's where you can really let the creativity fly that comes with the ambiguity. So that would be my pro tip.
Dana reminds me, when I was with you all, and I'm sure you
and
guys
when you still respected me.
When I still respected you, of course. Yeah, I'm just such an evil person. But I remember when we used to do those little innovation pop-ups, like at the Q Center and everywhere else, and we had a banner that said "Fall in love with the problem," and that was kind of an anchor as to don't forget about the problem, and because you start to get into these really creative ideas and solutions, and then if you lose sight on it, then you're not really solving what you actually started from, or if you get in the situation, Bob, like you did, where again, like COVID happens, so something else happens. So then you have to rethink it. We'll come back to that problem. What are we trying to solve? I think that's a great technique.
Well, and Jake, it's funny because my mind was going down that same path because the whole idea of falling in love with a problem is based in design thinking tools, right?
Yep.
So I think design thinking tools are probably a good way of navigating ambiguity, of reframing problems, of looking at things differently.
Exactly. Yeah. And those are a lot of the ones I use. And so going back to the exercise or the problem that I mentioned, or the situation of what is the future profession, or what is the future L&D profession, because again, that helps shape your strategy and so forth. There's a couple of things that I would recommend that you can call them a mix between design thinking. You can call it mix between the futurist strategy or futurist planning. But one I use this constantly is I think you need a team to do this, but you need to have someone that's constantly doing internal and external signal monitoring. So just kind of getting a sense of like what is happening in the world outside of your industry and your bubble. And it could be both internal and external, and just seeing what is happening, because that is helping you tell a story and again, no one knows what's happening in the future. No one has any idea. But at least it gives, there's two things. One, it helps kind of guide what solutions I could come up with. But it also gives you access to very creative ideas outside your bubble of just being aware of what's around you. The other method that I did with kind of this problem is, and we're working on this right now, is today and tomorrow visioning. So you tell a story of what is today, like what is the landscape, the context of today, and then you conceptualize tomorrow. And again, you don't know, but at least you start to uncover some possible ideas. You think about like some what ifs, and that, again, I would recommend doing that with someone else, because a lot of the process of telling that story, you think of, it's like the ping ball effect, where you're just like, oh, what if this and what if that, and go on, and then you end up talking about Batman, and we keep bringing up that joke, but that's an exercise of what Dana and I did in a room together, where we were trying to solve a problem, a very unknown problem, and we landed on a Batman topic at one point. It was pretty funny, but yeah. So I would do internal, external signal monitoring is one, today and tomorrow visioning, And then there's other methods like design planning, like I think concept mapping or concept, the poster generation or front cover thing. There's a lot of stuff that you
There's
do.
a
lot of things
techniques
that you can do, but just to get you out of just thinking of unknown, but it gives you a structure to reframe this ambiguous moment into something that can be creative and
Jake, I think you hit on another important dimension, at least from my perspective, and that is sometimes an individual will think along a particular way, but when you bring in other people, other perspectives, on those types of activities, particularly if they are cross-discipline, right? If they're not all from the same area, sometimes you'll come up with ideas that never would have crossed your mind.
Yeah. Again, all design thinking concepts, which bringing it back full circle, not a surprise it comes from Stanford D School, right?
Exactly.
This whole series. So that's awesome.
And I know we're up on time and over on time, but last thing I would say, one of my favorite quotes from the book is that it said, "Do the harder thing." That was one of the final messages that they gave you, and it's something that I think I have to remind myself all the time of doing the harder thing, because it's very easy to find a solution that can give you very incremental gains or something that you've done in the past and it feels comfortable. But by doing these methods and forcing yourself to do the harder thing does unlock better opportunities and finds new paths that you may have never have gone down before. So anyway, that was one of my favorite things. I remember marking that up, put it on a Post-it after I read it.
I like that too, although I also thought, do the harder thing unless you're absolutely sure that doing the easier thing is the right thing to do. But that's not so catchy. Maybe I'll put that in my book. Again, that's ambiguous.
No, it's a great tip though.
It's true,
If it's going to drive high value and be easier, why not?
Sometimes it is the right solution to take the easy path.
But maybe the way to say
yourself is
maybe be open to the harder thing. Maybe that's what it is. Be open.
And the harder thing often involves more risk.
Right.
It does.
So you have to be open to risk.
Yeah, for sure.
It does. Yeah.
Julie and I actually had that discussion the other day about the various risks that we've taken. And every time we've taken a risk, it's paid off.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Same. And often not in the way that I wanted it to.
Yeah.
But always pans out. And that gives you that trust that it's all going to be okay, which you really need.
Yep.
All right, guys, we need to wrap this up. Thank you, as always. Thanks, Jake, for bringing in the topic. Great conversation, and I got a lot out of it. Hopefully you, our listeners, got a lot out of it as well. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast. Please comment on it in your podcast tool of choice. That really helps the algorithm, helps people find us if you not just rate it, but also put a little comment on there about how great we are, or even how not great we are. That still helps the algorithm.
It's
crazy.
Still something. There's a few in there that someone mentioned that it's kind of good, and they say the same word all the time. I can't remember which one it is, but go for it.
Right.
Tell us what you think.
All right, boys. We'll see you later. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks
you.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.